I'm the Genius Asian. Welcome to the Genius family.
Today we are going to show you how to replace a treadmill walking belt and how to adjust the tension on a treadmill walking belt. If you are going to replace the entire belt, there will be 3 key points where you will need to loosen and perhaps remove the bolts. The first one is the right-hand bolt on the front roller, and then the 2 bolts for the rear roller. If you are just aiming to adjust the tension, you will only be working with the 2 rear bolts. First, we will work on simply adjusting the tension on the belt, since that is the easier job. If your belt is off-center to the left, then you need to either tighten the screw on the left-hand side of the treadmill or slightly loosen the screw on the right-hand side of the treadmill. If your treadmill belt is off-center to the right, then you need to either slightly tighten the bolt on the right-hand side or slightly loosen the one on the left-hand side, and then try again to see if that has corrected. Most manufacturers recommend that you not adjust the bolts in the back more than a quarter turn at a time. When adjusting the rear bolts for the tension, you want to make sure that you're not getting it either too tight, which can overwork the motor, and certainly not too loose, because if it's too loose, what happens is what you see here, where the rollers are turning, but actually the belt is not. Because the rollers, it's so loose that the rollers can just continue to slip, but a person's weight is holding the belt down. Whether you are replacing the belt or just adjusting it, we have 2 tips that will help you a great deal. One is to use a rubber band on one side of the Allen wrench. Another is to have a bit of paper and a pen or pencil to write down how many turns you've completed. To do this, we used the Allen wrench that came with the treadmill, and you notice that there is a red rubber band around one side of the handle. That is to help us count how many turns we have made with the Allen wrench, so that we know how much we will need to tighten it up again. So we counted how many times we turned the left one, how many times we turned the right one, and then we wrote the number down on a little tag of paper. After you've loosened the rear roller, then take off the front motor cover. So now we're going to go ahead and show you how to replace the treadmill belt. We're going to need to remove everything on the right-hand side to do this. First, remove the right bolt for the front roller. But before you remove that bolt, make sure you measure the distance as you see here, so that you will know how much to tighten it again later when you are finished. You may be able to use your hand to loosen this bolt, or you may use a screwdriver. As you can see, Allen wrench may not be the best tool to use here because this handle will hit the side of the treadmill. Next, we want to remove the end cap at the rear of the treadmill. This treadmill has one screw on the bottom holding the end cap to the treadmill. And to remove this, it was actually kind of hard because even this small screwdriver would not fit under the treadmill in order to loosen the screw. So what we did was we raised the rear end of the treadmill. This is not easy. This one is very heavy because it is not a foldable treadmill. But we did raise it, put blocks of wood under the rear legs of the treadmill. Another way you might do this is if you have screwdriver bits that might be used on an electric screwdriver or on a power tool. If you choose a small bit and then hold the bit in a pair of pliers like this, you will probably be able to fit under the rear end of the treadmill. Next, completely remove the bolts that hold the rear roller. So after removing those bolts, you can take the end cap off. You may have to apply some force, and then you'll be able to slide off the side rail. Next, we need to loosen these screws on the deck. These call for us to use a hex screwdriver, and we have 4 of these holding the deck in place. Depending on how your treadmill is constructed, after you've removed the bolt from the right-hand side of the rear roller, you may be able to lift up the deck and the roller and slide the belt off. However, we're going to show you something else, another step, which, although it is not essential, may make the job easier. That is, loosen the bolt on the left side of the treadmill, the bolt that holds the rear roller on the left side of the treadmill. Loosen that all the way, take it out. Again, you're keeping track of how many turns it took to get that bolt off. Write that down. After you have removed that bolt, then you see that the roller just drops down and can be slid out, making the belt much, much easier to slide off of the deck. You can tie a rope, first fastened to the board and then tie it around your waist. Make sure it's securely tied to the board. This way you can lift this right-hand edge of the board just enough to slip the belt off. We did this because we didn't want to remove the side rail and the screws on the left-hand side as well, because it is somewhat difficult. So now we have removed the entire belt, just lifting the board from the right-hand side a little bit. So now we have our new treadmill belt that we ordered from Amazon. It was sold to be compatible with the treadmill model that we have. So first we compare the length, looks about right. Then we compare the width, and in fact the new belt is a tiny bit narrower. And then here we are measuring the thickness with the calipers. The new belt, which is a single ply, is the same thickness or perhaps even a very minute amount thicker than the old belt. So now we need to slip the new treadmill belt onto the treadmill deck. First, we propped up the rear end of the deck with some pieces of wood, like you see here, and so that helps to lift the deck, which is quite heavy. Then we tied the rope around the front end of the deck so we would be able to slide the front end of the belt over the roller and the deck on that end. So here you can see as we're just starting to slide partway on. Once the belt has been slid about halfway on and you're running into those blocks at the rear, we're going to have to take them out. So now the lifting is going to be done simply with the rope that is wrapped around the body, as you see here. Okay? It has been already attached to the front of the treadmill. So the treadmill deck is lifted, and then the belt can be slid the remaining way over the deck. Okay, so now it's time to reassemble the other parts. So there are 3 key points that you will be adjusting. There's the front right bolt of the on the front roller, and then there are the 2 rear bolts for the rear roller. Okay, and it is important with the front that you make sure that the roller is at a right angle to the frame of the treadmill. If you previously marked on a piece of paper, as we suggested, the distance that the bolt needs to go in, that's great. You can use that. If you didn't, or if you just want to check to be sure, you can use tools and maybe a block of wood to help you see if it is at 90 degrees or square. Adjust the front roller bolt until it is 90 degrees. Then you can start working on the rear roller bolts. When you first replaced the rear roller, you inserted the bolt so it's attached to the rear end, but you haven't tightened it yet. So you can see that it is not tight by this gap between the outside end of the bolt and the frame. As you tighten the bolt, you can count the number of turns you make. In the end, you will need to turn it enough times so that the bolt is flush against the frame. But it is useful to know how many times on one side you've turned it, how many times on the other, so you can see if you are in the ballpark or not, although they may not end up being exactly an identical number of turns. Once both the right and the left bolts in the rear are flush with the frame, that is the point when additional adjustments will start tightening and increasing the tension on the belt, and you will start to see a gap appear in this place. We found some parts on the underside of the deck that we weren't quite sure how to manage. This is a non-folding model, by the way. This part that you see there is being taken out, was attached to a plate under the frame. We found, after some looking around, that it is referred to as a walking belt guide. However, it's not clear to us whether the belt, when it is replaced, so the belt running along the underside of the deck, does the inside of the belt face this walking belt guide, or does the outside of the belt face the walking belt guide? Does the belt go in this position, or does it go in this position? Again, where does the belt go relative to the walking belt guide? There is one of these on each side of the treadmill on the frame under the deck. We are also a little bit puzzled because in all the many, many videos we have watched while trying to replace the walking belt, we have not seen this kind of a walking belt guide on the frame of the treadmills we have seen. After a couple of emails back and forth with the Vision Fitness service department, we did get an answer from them. This is what it was. It was that the walking belt guide goes between the deck and the belt. In order to picture it, you can look here. Therefore, it is the inside of the belt that is in contact with the walking belt guide. For ideal operation of the treadmill, the front and rear rollers are completely parallel to one another. However, in reality, the treadmill is subject to various forces, of course, as you walk or run on it. Therefore, the function of the walking belt guides are to help keep the belt centered, even as it is subjected to these many different impacts and forces pulling it one way or another. When you find your belt is not running in the center and is shifting to one side or the other, what has happened is that the two rollers are not sufficiently parallel. And so adjusting rear roller is actually attempting to adjust it so that these two rollers are more parallel. It may be easier to tell if you have adjusted the rear bolts enough if the walking belt guides are loosened briefly as you adjust the rear bolts. This way you will be able to more accurately center the belt as it runs on the two rollers without being subjected to that additional centering pressure from the belt guides. So then once you have accurately centered the belt, then you can retighten the walking belt guides. You're aiming as much as possible to have the belt ideally centered so that there is less wear and tear on the belt, so that it is running evenly against the walking belt guides on both sides with minimal pressure. Once you have the belt centered, then you can go about putting the side rail back on and attaching the end cap. So you can slide the side rail back on, hopefully. But in our case, we found that it was really, really difficult to slide, so we did have to lubricate a bit with some WD-40. Then the side rail slid on, and we went to put the end cap on.
Share this with people who you know that need it. Leave your own genius tips in the comment section below. Don't forget, I'm the Genius Asian. Subscribe for more useful videos.